She said that she didn't know if she could work for a woman. And not only did she work for me, but when she retired, her daughter worked for me.
Hey, hi, hello, and welcome back to the Queer Vision podcast. I am your co host, Co, and in a second, you will see our other lovely co host, Becca. Today, we sat down with Dr. Susan Sherman. Susan is a queer elder, a retired professor, a licensed counselor, and has a PhD that she got at 50 years old. So if you think your life is falling apart and you're 25, I'm adding myself. Girl, anything can change at any fucking time, and it's not that serious. We take ourselves so serious, and it's like, girl, like one day this is gonna be nothing. But in this episode, we talk about a lot. We talk about coming out, her coming out story in 1976, building a career when women weren't even allowed to be in the room, getting married in a courthouse only to be told by the governor of Michigan that she wasn't married anymore. We also got to talk about, what it means to fight for your rights and to continue to fight for your rights because at the end of the day, all these rights can come and go. And that is scary and somehow kind of beautiful in a weird way because it means that as long as the laws and the country is working how it's supposed to, that we can still fight to get things back where we want them to be. Um, and now more than ever, I think we can't take anything for granted. And that's just the sad reality. But we keep pushing, we keep fighting, and we keep advocating and doing what we need to do to be visible and play our part in this weird, crazy time that we all live in. Susan brought a lot of light. This was a truly amazing episode with so much wisdom packed in. Genuinely, one of the ones where we have barely even talked because there was just so much good stuff in here. So buckle up, get a snack. This is part one of two because Susan will be back and get into it. Thank you so much for
Great.
sitting down with us on the Queer Vision.
I don't know how much you'll get out of an old lady, but
No, I'm so excited to sit down and talk. Usually we just have you start out by like your name, pronouns, and just like talk a little bit about yourself.
and
Anything you want the viewers to know up front.
yeah. Okay. Well, my name is Dr. Susan Sherman, and she, her, and I've had a very interesting life. I came out in 1976, but before that, let me just start at the beginning. I was,
Yeah.
unlike my accent, born in Brooklyn, New York, and I lived in Queens, and then went to elementary school um, in Port Jefferson on
Oh.
Long Island. And then my parents opened a store there. And
Oh.
and then we moved to when I was in the sixth grade, 12, we moved to Naples, Florida, which
Mm.
at that time was a very small town, right by the Everglades. And you had to go to Fort Myers for school clothes. That's how small it was. And they opened a store in the first mall in Naples. You'd never know that today, um, if you know the area. So, yeah, so I went to middle school and high school in Naples, Florida. I tended to date in high school. I tended to date older guys. I like them better. And in 1974, Roe happened in 73. And I got pregnant in 74. He was a blonde haired, blue eyed surfer dude. And my friend Jan drove me across Alligator Alley to Fort Lauderdale to a clinic. And back then, it hadn't been a year since Roe. Right. And, it was kind of a clinic and rustic kind of setting. I got pregnant between Naples had one gynecologist. So between the time I made the appointment to get birth control and got the birth control, and I was 16 at that time. So came back. I worked all the time. I worked my first real job, I guess, because I worked in my parents' stores, but was at the Sheraton on the beach, Sheraton Hotel on the beach, Naples, and there I met uh, Meg, and we used to double date a lot. And what I realized is that I could care less about the guys, but I was in love with Meg. Yeah. It just kind of happened that way. I guess it's because, and I was talking to my wife, and she said, "Tell him about the pictures I saw of your sister sitting in a, pink car going around, and you were in a Jeep." And then, she got a Barbie, and I wanted a GI Joe. Guess I should have known that. But so that's when I kind of first realized. I said, and then I worked for a grocery store, Grand Union, which you probably never heard of, and
Have not.
Naples at the time. And then from there, I went to 1976. I went to Florida State University. And my first day of college, my first class, which was 300, I met a woman, and that's who I came out with. And it was very interesting because I remember, we were drinking because, that's what we all did back then. Um, and she, she says to me, "Well, you don't want to go wherever with me because I'm bisexual." And I just looked at her and I said, "I am too." And that was the first
Right.
time I'd actually said it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that was 1976. At the end of that first year of college, my parents told me I could either come home and go to community college or not. And I chose
Mhm.
not. And so I dropped out of college for about a year and got really, really poor. Worked
Mhm.
different kind of jobs and ended up with grants and loans and went back to school and ended up getting my bachelor's in rehabilitation counseling. And I went on to get my master's in rehabilitation counseling. Back when I was a psych major and I didn't want to be a psych major because I wasn't going to touch rats. And so I was looking in the catalog, by that. Back then it was on Pages.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking, there was, counseling and there was rehab counseling, but counseling only had a master's and rehab counseling had a bachelor's. So I went into that. And then they offered me a traineeship if I wanted to go into their master's program. And so I did. I was on my
Hell yeah.
own. Anyway, I lived with Susie for a couple years. She was an alcoholic, let's just say that, for about a year or two. And in fact, about 2 years ago, I went on a cruise, an Olivia cruise, which is an all-women's cruise. A friend of mine who I knew from back then, and we've sort of found each other on Facebook, and she lives out on the West Coast and does sailing stuff and she grew up in Fort Lauderdale. And so she was going to work the cruise. So I was standing in the back listening to whatever concert was going on, and she comes up to me, and I look at her, and she looks at me, and she goes, she was cray cray. And I'm like, And that was, 77, maybe 78, 77.
You're like, yeah, I live with her. I know.
You know, you know her. You want me to shut up? Let me know.
No, keep
Okay.
talking. That's the
And
whole
so,
point of a podcast.
I mean, in 1976, so on my way to college, six was what, the bicentennial?
Yeah.
1976, and I went to Tampa Stadium on the way to Tallahassee, and all the great bands, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and
Mm.
I mean everybody, Creedence Clearwater Revival. I mean everybody was, and the only thing I remember back then is all the joints that were being passed around, and it was the '70s, man, and I was kind of
Yeah.
a hippie.
Sounds about right.
You'd
That's
never know that, would you?
I mean, I can glean it.
Whether you get to know me. So let's see. From there, I met Kathy. I ended up in Tallahassee 1 year in the early 81, maybe 80, 81. There was something called the Amazon Express, and it came up through Florida uh, and went to the Michigan Women's Music Festival. And so I was on that bus and, had a great time at the Michigan Women's Music Festival. Spent a little time with a woman from Alaska was great because I was in Florida and she was from Alaska, and that was it, I'm just saying. And then the next year I showed up with Kathy and I look behind me, all these hundreds of people, right? I look behind me, there she is with her partner. It's a small world. So anyway, it was harder to keep in touch with people back then because, there were no cell phones and everything was long
Yeah.
distance.
Yeah. No Facebook.
Yeah, no Facebook, no podcasts.
Yeah.
oh, that part.
No internet, really.
Eh.
Not the same.
So, and on the way home, that year, I met a woman named Jan on the bus. She was from Tampa, I think, and she was telling me that her friend had just moved to Tallahassee to go to law school. Well, her friend, it turns out, to be my next door neighbor, and so I moved in with the girl next door.
Oh.
My sister had moved up. My sister. You couldn't be more different. I had curly hair, she had straight. She was getting divorced. I said, you can't live in Naples. So she came up, moved her stuff up, and put her stacked heels all around my one-bedroom apartment. So we moved to the house, and next door was Kathy's. And we went to a number of other women's music festivals in Michigan, and it was on the old land. It was back in the early '80s,
Yeah.
So during that time, I marched for ERA. Remember that thing? No, you don't, because we don't have it.
No.
The Equal Rights
What is
Movement.
that?
The
Mm.
the
Yeah.
steps of the Tallahassee Capitol back then. I
Mhm.
mean, so I've always kind of been active, uh,
Mhm.
and let's see. So yeah, the march, and then I went to a couple of more, like I said, Michigan Women's Music Festivals, and then in 1983, I went and marched in the 20th anniversary Martin Luther King March on Washington, which was, and John Lewis, I don't know if you know who he is. He was a civil rights icon.
Hmm.
He ended up later on being my representative in DeKalb County, Georgia.
Oh,
He's
hell yeah.
passed, but if you don't know about him, you should learn about him. He's
Yeah.
something. So that was Kathy, I met Jane. So Kathy and I somehow didn't work out, and
Yeah.
it happens.
Yeah.
And I met Jane, and the first thing I remember around 1983 and meeting her is, I picked her up for a date, and I'm driving along, and she looks at me, she goes, "You know I'm straight, don't you?" And I just smiled at her, you know. Anyway, we were together for 6 years.
Be
Can't
like
help it.
that.
She wasn't straight.
Yeah.
Uh, and during those years, I can tell you a little bit about my career in a few
Uh-huh.
minutes. I ended up becoming an independent living counselor in North Florida after I graduated with my master's.
Hmm.
You know what independent living is?
Yeah.
I
Okay.
I don't think
So,
vaguely
yeah.
do, but yeah, please educate me a little bit more because
it was helping people with disabilities become more independent and how
Okay.
whatever. I mean, I remember the second place
Excuse
was
me, sorry.
a living center for the blind and visually
Mm.
impaired. And I had this area in rural North Georgia. I mean, excuse me, Florida. And I remember teaching a woman to get from a house to her outhouse and back. I mean,
Hmm.
she was
Yeah.
blind. So, just interesting stuff. And then I got a job at the Roosevelt Warm Springs Institute for Rehabilitation. Have you ever heard of it?
Hmm.
I have not.
It is the place that Franklin Delano Roosevelt opened up.
Hmm.
Wow.
Warm Springs, he had polio. He ended up actually, there was also a little White House there, and he would see his mistress there. But back then, of course, I didn't know him, but
Yeah.
Roosevelt was there. And what's interesting about it is, I was with Jane at this time, but my wife, current wife, her mother went there. She was had polio as a child. I was in Warm Springs and with Jane, and it was a great place.
Yeah.
My office was in a cottage.
Yeah.
So I was an independent living counselor at that point in Georgia, but it was in Warm Springs, and so we lived in Noonan, which was halfway between Warm Springs and civilization. I mean Atlanta, and so I was young. I mean, I was
Mhm.
young, and so we took a transfer into Atlanta. I took a transfer into Atlanta, so we moved to Atlanta, and that's where all the fun begins. Trying to think, we did a lot of things back then. Jane was now PAC treasurer. So we went and heard Walter Mondale and Geraldine Ferraro, as, running for vice president, which
Hmm.
was like
Mhm.
one of the first women. And I want you to think about this era of 70s and 80s, particularly early 80s, when women didn't have the same opportunities, let me put it that way, as men. I mean,
Hmm.
and here I was, a gay, non-Christian woman in Georgia. But we'll get to that. Ruby, back then, and I feel somewhat from women today because we had bookstores. We could go to the
Mhm.
women's bookstore, we meet people. There were, readings. We had our own bars. We had lesbian bars. And so we'd meet at the bar and all these places. There was Ruby Fruit Books in Tallahassee, which was owned by a friend of mine, Joan Denman, and Karis in Atlanta, you know and there's other places. Went back then, whenever you went someplace, you could find that kind of thing, and you don't have
Mhm.
that today. It's all
Right.
That's true.
online, and I worry about that with you folks.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. It does make it hard to make connections
it
sometimes.
Yeah,
does.
because even in the bars, I feel like people just still struggle to talk to each other,
Yeah.
like, without, like, having a phone connection first.
Yeah. Or
Like, it's
or
something about it.
if there's something going on, you're like, oh, I don't want to interrupt the performance, but now the performance is over and everybody's leaving. So now I
Right,
don't make the
and
connections.
y'all
Yeah.
aren't
Yeah.
meeting back at the club. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or wherever. But
Yeah.
yeah, back then, and certainly in Atlanta, there were a lot of women's music people that came
Hmm.
through
Mhm.
times and different things.
Yeah.
So Jane and I, I'm a bad girl. So Jane and I broke up, and after living together, and then I'm in Atlanta, right? And so I ended up after we broke up, a friend of mine drugged me. I mean, she kicking and screaming to this women's dinner. okay? Because I really, at that point, wasn't fit for human consumption. And so, after the dinner, my friend Kelly and all these women, they went out to a bar, and I met a woman named Jane. I mean, excuse me, what's her name? My current wife.
Okay.
Not Jane. I tell you, it's hard.
Hey, Susan, what's your wife's name?
What is my wife's name? My wife's name. Why did you ask? We've only been together 36 years. It's hard to remember,
That's real.
you know? I'm just
I
saying.
get it.
But anyway, they drugged me to this thing, and I went. So we all partied together, and my Anne, my current wife, she asked my friend Kelly out because I
Hmm.
guess I wasn't fit for human consumption. So Kelly went out with her one time, and Kelly came back to me and said she's perfect for you. Well, so I called her up, and we were talking on the phone. So you guys, talking, and what do you do? Well, I'm for the rehab counseling, this kind of thing. And she said, I said my master's, my bachelor's in rehab counseling. She goes, oh, I have a master's in divinity from Emory Theological Institute. And I went, and it just came out. I said, oh, I hate religion. And she said, oh, good. I thought, okay. And so we went out, and I can't remember exactly, but anyway, she invited me home for blueberry pie. Now,
Hmm.
for me, blueberry pie came out of the freezer. I don't know about y'all, but she made it from like flour and blueberries. It was amazing. And so I never left. And it'll be 36 years in June 22nd. And we've had an amazing life together.
And
She
you
was
said the last time that we talked, you had said that you guys were one of the ones that got married before it was technically
so
legal.
I'm getting there, yes.
Okay, okay. I'm ahead of myself.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
That's okay. So, we would go, she was sang in the Atlanta Feminist Women's Chorus. I mean, I just want you to see the kind of support and things we
Hmm.
did because I think
Yeah,
that's important to know,
it really is.
you know.
100%.
So yeah, we went to, all the gay prides marches, all that kind of thing. Around the time I met her in 90, I had worked on the Americans with Disabilities Act. You know what that is, the ADA?
Mm-hmm.
Prior to the ADA, when I met her, I was a 504 coordinator for the
Mm.
Department of Human Resources, which is the precursor to ADA, which states that no entity that receives federal financial assistance can discriminate. And so I worked on the ADA and got an award, and I was at the signing. So that was all around the time, that I was meeting her. So I guess she thought I was interesting. So I had this whole career, we went to the disability rights marches in Washington. We went to the women's rights marches, the gay rights marches, all kinds of stuff. We went to something called the Southern Women's Music Festivals, and then Rhythm Fest, which was closer. The March on Washington for gay rights, I think was in 93.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was just amazing some of the things we did. Our first cruise was the Big Red Boat. I don't know if you ever heard of that. And then in 96, what happened in 96? 96 was the Paralympics and the Olympics, okay? So we went to a number of Olympic events. We were there that afternoon and had just left when the bombing occurred.
Mm.
And our friend Keisha was there, so we were worried, but we found her and she was fine. I remember that. So, yeah, that was interesting. And then we went to the Paralympics because I got box seats because, at that point I was, a big deal in the state in rehabilitation. So it was great. It was great. Great life. 19 Okay. So around 96, 97, our friends started having, I call them gabies, little gabies. I didn't want a gaby. I didn't want kids. And so I birthed a hot tub. And then my friends would come over and get in my hot tub and hand me their little gaby. So yes, we went and met with somebody in Philadelphia and talked about it. And she worked with some agencies, with couples like us. And we got a person who actually talked to both of us when we did the initial, visit, home
Mm-hmm.
visit. But it was written on me because I was working for the state and I had the insurance.
Yeah.
And
And I
this
think
was
you said last time that we had talked too, you said that you couldn't have both of you be on it because
wait.
it wasn't legal yet.
So what happened was, you drew a judge, and the legal adoption occurred with me, and so 6 months later, we tried to get Anne There was no law that said she couldn't in Georgia, okay? And so, we had to go back to the judge I drew, and he had never done it before, and so
Mhm.
apparently he prayed about it, and his assistant helped him to see the light, and he decided that children are better off with two parents than one, and so he did the adoption. And then we sent in, she was born in El Paso, Texas. She was 5 weeks old when we got her. So we sent the birth certificate for both of our names back into Texas, and there was a guy named W that was governor at the time.
Mhm.
George. Anyway, they wrote me back to say that there was a law from 1926 or 20, something like that, that said, then two women tried to do this and they couldn't, so sorry. And so even to this day, our daughter Sarah only has my name on the birth certificate.
And she's like a full adult now.
She's 28, I believe, 27. She's the troll that lives upstairs. I bought a house with 2 stories, so she lives upstairs and I
Yeah.
live downstairs because I'm a stacker. I like things neat and orderly. And she's a
Mm.
spreader.
Mm-hmm.
She can spread
Real.
upstairs. I don't have to see it.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
there
fair.
you have it. So that was in 97. We took vacations in Provincetown for the women's, festivals and
Mm-hmm.
things. We took Sarah to Cancun, the Mayan ruins. And what you need to know is that so I'm still in Georgia. Okay, we're not in Michigan yet. So you could name on less than one hand how many women directors there had ever been in the state of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for some reason, I was the state ADA coordinator working for the state in the Office of Planning and Budget, and I decided to apply for the district director job of North Georgia because I thought it would be interesting to see the questions and what I would need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And they hired me. Whoa. So I was the district director of 29 counties and 2 facility programs north of Atlanta. And at that point, there had never been a woman supervisor, even
Mm-hmm.
in North District. And the district director's secretary, she told somebody when she heard it was me, and she didn't know me, but God knows it's bad enough I'm from Atlanta. But she said that she didn't know if she could work for a woman. And not only did she work for me, but when she retired, her daughter worked for me. We're still in contact today. Just saying,
Yeah.
that's the
You're kind
way
of a
you
badass.
change hearts and minds,
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Exactly.
that. So when Sarah came along, I was the district director of North Georgia, and they did a
Mm-hmm.
lot of quilting, some of the women up there. And one of my counseling staff brought me a quilt, and she looked at me and she said, "You have more support than you think." And I'll never forget that, Why, even
I
you
love that.
made a quilt for Sarah, my secretary at the time.
That's so sweet.
So that was great. But eventually they wouldn't leave me alone. Am I talking too much?
No.
No, no, no.
She wouldn't leave me alone, the director of the agency, and and so I said, I mean, I had the best job in the world. I got to drive around the North Georgia mountains. Hell, half the time my staff drove me around
Yes.
and see things. And, they called it driving Miss Susan. Just saying.
But
Gotta have a sense of humor, y'all. Um, So I said I would try it out, and I ended up becoming the assistant director of the agency for about 11 years before my
wow.
retirement. That was an amazing. I did not become the director because directors came and went. They were political,
Mm-hmm.
and I decided, I had a longer time horizon to retirement because
Right.
I wanted my pension, which I have today because I retired with almost 30 years.
Hell yeah.
During that time, we did all kinds of stuff. We had, Brave season tickets, all kinds of things in Atlanta. So my birthday is 9/11.
Oh my God, wait, you're a Virgo?
I am a Virgo. That's why I'm a stacker.
I understand why I love you.
Because you are a Virgo,
I'm a
right?
Virgo.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Well, we understand each other then,
Yeah.
Then you know
Yeah.
why that I'm prepared, okay? Um, so, um, so that day in 9/11/01, apparently we had friends that were importing lobsters from Legal Seafood in Boston to go to my wife, Anne's
Mm-hmm.
office. And they actually finally arrived, but she was all this stuff is going on and I didn't know about them. And she's like feeling bad. She's wondering about the lobsters. Okay.
Mm.
So it had to be like the last thing that came out of Boston before it got shut down. One of them died, but we had two. And so we were sitting there, and Sarah was in a high chair, and we were watching all this. I'll never forget it because I was in my office, and my staff ran in, and I had kind of a little suite thing because, I was the assistant director. And they came in, and then I know y'all aren't going to understand this, but they pulled out a TV on a cart, and the TV was on it. Okay? You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
No, that's what they did to me whenever I was in school when this happened. Oh,
Okay, so you know about the cart and the
I
TV.
experienced it. Yeah,
I
yeah,
was a
I
few
did.
months old.
Yeah, this
How
one's
old?
too young.
I was a few
What?
months old. I'm 25. I just turned 25.
Bless your heart.
Yeah,
And you are,
32.
I love it. You can baby my kids. Scary. Or grandkids, which is even scarier. I have a daughter older than you. Never mind. So, so I
Close
saw,
enough.
we turned it on and I saw it hit the second tower. Anyway, later that night in my house, I found out that they had ordered me, you know, and so we sat there eating lobsters from Legal Seafood in Boston while we watched that. And then for
Yeah.
years, if you had to show an ID for something, people would look at me and go, oh, and I would look at them and I'd say, but it was my birthday first. So that's my standard, my birthday first.
I actually had three guys that went to school with me that they were triplets. Their birthday was 9/11 as well.
That is
And they felt
um,
so bad for like we always did like the in school you get like a little party, right? And they
Mhm.
were like, we can't, we're not
Oh,
allowed, we're not doing it. And I'm like, you
yeah,
can still
no.
celebrate your birthday, it's okay. And they're like,
It was
no.
weird. It was weird.
Yeah.
I've had an interesting life. Okay, so
Yeah.
out in 2001, I called my boss up and I said, "Haven't you always wanted to send me on a slow boat to China?" And I said, "How about a fast plane?" And they supported me in doing a people-to-people exchange in China.
Oh
And I
my
went
God, wait a
into
minute.
hospitals and, Tiananmen Square, was very interesting. Somebody pulled out, some group of people pulled out a flag that said like furlong that you couldn't do. And they were on them. They had a lot of people with, machine guns and stuff walking around. And then I went to Xi'an, and Xi'an is where the terracotta warriors are. You know what I'm talking about? If you don't, you need to look it up. The
like I
terracotta
vaguely.
warriors are football feet. They uncovered football fields full of terracotta warriors, and every one of them is different. Every one of them is different. And so I'm walking around this place, and it was just very surrealistic. I mean, you could hardly believe it.
Yeah.
So China was an interesting place, yes, because they practice both traditional and in some places Western medicine. It's
Hmm.
interesting. Don't get sick in China.
So
Anyway,
you did a people to people program. I
yes.
also did a people to people program, but as one of the students.
Well, I was really when China.
No, mine was 2007 was Fiji, New Zealand, and Australia, and then
Hey.
2008 was Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and England.
Oh,
And
I
they
love.
had us stay with a host family in each of them for like a week.
Well, we had good friends that had a civil union, and they had friends that came over from London.
Mm.
And so it was right before Sarah was born. And so we went with them on their honeymoon back to London. And I met Belinda and Sally, who lived
Mm.
there. We went to London, we went to Wales, and I loved Wales.
Wales is beautiful.
And we stayed on a working farm, and they were very excited because they had
Mm.
just gotten a Jersey cow. I'm just saying. So,
Jersey
yeah,
cows are really cute though.
they are. So it was really pretty cool. It was a great time, but I digress, I guess. China. So I've had some interesting experiences. So
Yes.
I decided I had almost 29 years and I was over it and I decided to retire. And this was around 2011, I think, 10, 11. And I thought to myself, as I'm retiring, what am I going to be when I grow up? And what you need to understand is I've been president of everything. I was
Yeah.
president of the association. I was president of the board that looks at accreditation for these
Hmm.
programs. I mean, all kinds of stuff. Everybody, and I did a lot of speaking, which is why I can never remember anybody's name
I can't
because
either. It's
I
so
would
funny.
have 300 people looking at me, and they knew my name, but they expected me to know their name.
Hmm.
So I had
Okay,
staff
but Susan, what's your wife's name?
and it's like I'm thinking about all these other women, right? It's like,
Don't tell that. Don't tell her that.
yeah, don't put that on because I'm going to have to send this to people, and she's included. You think about women anyway, which I do a lot of. Anyway, so So I thought to myself, okay, so I said, okay. And both Michigan State University and University of Wisconsin at Madison both said, come and we will pay you to do this. And I said, "Oh, okay." And I said, honey, we're moving to Michigan. I decided to go to Michigan State. And do you know why? Michigan. Remember the women's music festivals? Have you ever seen this
Yeah.
magazine? Lesbian Connection. You need
We
to check
should.
it out. Okay. So it was when I first went to the music festivals in the early days, late 70s, I guess, early 80s.
Hmm.
And this is where I found this. And it came out of East Lansing, Michigan. Well, that's where Michigan
Wow.
State was. And so I knew there'd be lots of family, and there was. And we met all these wonderful women, in Michigan. And so we moved to Michigan, and I was insane enough to get my PhD at 50. And so, but what I discovered is, I grew up in Florida and I moved to Georgia for the change of season,
Hmm.
and I found myself in Michigan.
Well,
So
there's a change of season there.
soon as I graduated, we'd go out to Sarah, and she was, went to some of the high school like football games and different things in middle school. And we learned to dress in layers to be like a duck.
Hmm.
You have to dress in layers. But anyway, so as soon as I graduated, I ran south to the purplish state I could find and ended up here
Yep.
in Greenville, North Carolina at East Carolina University. And I was hired to be the director of their master's in rehabilitation counseling program. But before we get to that, I want to say that while I was in my PhD program at Michigan State, we ended up taking some of our class. So I was a PhD student. I was a little older. And so the other students called me Ma, and they would come over and we would feed them.
Oh.
They're still my good friends today. Dr. Leahy, who was my major professor in the PhD program, took us to Ireland. My God. So we went on a kind of it's like a people to people exchange because I went into
Hmm.
their rehab centers and things like that. And I loved Dublin. I don't know if you've
Hmm.
been to Dublin. Um, Temple Bar in Dublin
Hmm.
has the best smoked salmon I ever had in my life. And I was
Wow.
born in Brooklyn, honey.
Of the things to get excited about in Scotland.
Ireland.
Oh, in
Yeah.
Ireland. Yeah.
Yeah, Ireland. And the Cliffs of
They're not
Moher,
the same. I know that.
did you go see the Cliffs of Moher?
No.
My God, beautiful cliffs, beautiful countryside. So anyway, I got to do that while I was getting my PhD. And
I love that.
bye honey, I'm going to Ireland now. Bye honey, I'm going to China. I traveled a lot. I was a paid speaker to come and speak to them at a conference in, I don't know, Hawaii. So
Yeah.
they sent me down there and they paid, people paid for it and stuff. I've been very lucky. I've traveled a lot of places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, we moved back and I became a professor, and I just retired a couple years ago from that. And now I have two state retirements and Social Security. And you know what? I wish you guys could have that,
No, that's real.
I
I was about to
wish
say,
you.
at this day and age,
It's
that's
amazing.
good. Yeah,
It
to
is.
have truly with the
No,
economy.
no one does pension anymore, I don't
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very, very lucky. So I pulled out my resume to kind of look through it,
Yes.
and there are 13 pages, starting with education, licensure, and certification. So I was in the first group that ever became licensed professional counselors in Georgia. And I kept that license until I retired. I was a certified rehabilitation counselor. I've been on the board a couple times, and still am a certified rehabilitation counselor. When I was in Georgia, they sent me I got to go to certified public manager school, so I'm a CPM and a licensed clinical mental health counselor until I let it
Mm.
expire, and that was here in North Carolina. Yeah, so I was the assistant professor and a director of rehabilitation and career counseling, and the coordinator of the rehabilitation counseling certificate program. So
So
I've
you're
done a
busy
lot of
bee.
fabulous things. I got journal articles, book chapters, other stuff, research.
I think
Doctoral
it's
dissertation was My doctoral dissertation in 215 was State Federal VR Director Perceptions of Programs, Challenges, and Needs in the Future of Rehabilitation Counseling Programs.
wow.
So, that was my dissertation before I moved
That's
here.
amazing.
And so I've taught a lot of different classes. Now, what you need to understand is that the classes I taught here for the whole counseling department in the College of Allied Health Sciences, and I was in DARS, the Department of Addiction and Rehabilitation Services.
Mm.
And they also had a clinical program. But I taught multicultural counseling and I
Okay.
taught ethics and I dealt in lots of multicultural issues, things like that. Things that when I look today, you couldn't even put my syllabus up today of what they're doing to education. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just, y'all, I'm heartbroken. They're trying to take away the laws like Americans with Disabilities Act and 504 that some of us have worked years on, just like they
Yeah.
took
Yeah.
away Roe. Who would have ever
Yeah.
thought? You know,
Yeah.
what would I have done? What would
Yeah.
I have done?
Yeah. Imagine
My
how much
life,
different your life would have been.
imagine how much different
Yeah.
my life would have been. Oh, and
Yeah.
by the way, he had 2 kids and lived in a trailer and worked at the 7-Eleven. He was really hot. Sorry.
It'd be like that.
And then it's like, no, women.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, just women.
it's inspiring to also hear like how you've let yourself like have different interests and like be okay transitioning. I think that's so important for people to hear, especially like younger queer people. I think we all, and I think it's not a new thing. I think everybody's always probably felt this way in some regard, but we always have the rush to like figure it out and be like, oh, I have to have my whole life planned out. And it never goes that
If
way
you would have
usually.
told me that I would be a professor with a PhD, I would have laughed in your face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife is the academic, she's the one with the, you know, 4 O's and, all that kind of thing,
Mhm.
I would not have believed it. But
Speaking of your
she's also,
wife,
huh?
you never did tell us about your marriage. You never said how you got married.
Okay. So in my marriage, so in 2014, so I told you Michigan had a big women's community. And we would get together, we'd have, I think it was like a Friday night potluck once a month or whatever. And we were at doing something, or maybe we were at a concert. I can't remember. And so apparently the law had come down in Michigan where it was 2014 so that you could there's nothing that said you couldn't get married.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, people were talking about going Monday because courthouses aren't open on the weekends, right? And then, you know, we're like, okay. So got up Saturday morning early and I was looking at my phone. Remember, we now have phones. And I was like, oh shit, they opened the courthouse. It was in the next county over where the courthouse was. I said, honey, wake up. We got to go get married. Wake Sarah up. And so we all woke up and we were driving to the courthouse. And I said to my daughter, who was I guess she was in high school, maybe freshman, something like it. She was young. I said to her, I said, now, Sarah, I don't know what we're going to find when we get there.
Yeah.
Because, I didn't know if there'd be protests or demonstrate. I didn't know. And
Yeah.
I said, and so we're driving off, and she says to us, well, I just want you to know, if we die, I loved you all. And so that was on my way to my marriage. I got to the courthouse and there was nothing, nothing.
Yeah.
And I got out of the car, we got out of the car, and I'm walking around, and some woman sticks her head out of the door, and she said, may I help you? And I was like, well, and she's like, come in here. And so we walked in, and that's where the party was. And so we walked over, and we turned out the daughter who worked at the courthouse of the woman of the people that lived across the street from us in Michigan at East Lansing, she was there to help. And so it was great. The mayor was there. He signed our, thing. And then the woman who was helping us, because we signed all the paperwork, looked at me and she said, do you need somebody to marry you? Well, I thought signing the paperwork was marriage. Who knew? And she looked around and I said, well, no. And she looked around and she goes, what about him? And I looked at him and he was a young man with one of those clergy things around his neck. And he looked at me and I looked at him and I walked over to him and I said, what flavor are you? And he said, Unitarian Universalist. And I said, you'll do. And so Nick Cable just graduated from seminary. He wanted to come over and help, and we were the first people he ever married.
Awesome.
He and his wife have 2 daughters now, and they live in Ohio, and we stay in touch.
I love that so much.
So that's how we got married. So we're married, right? It was exciting. Well, there's a place I used to go to in East Lansing. Is a sushi restaurant. I loved sushi. And I would walk in and he was already making my drink, which was a cosmopolitan with the right vodka. Okay? Belvedere, Belvedere. Tell people here, Belvedere. Anyway, kind of fussy. You get older, you get fussy about your liquors. Of course, I'm not supposed to drink anymore, but we won't go there. So we walked in and, we're excited. We're celebrating with some people. We had lunch. And apparently by 4 o'clock that afternoon, the governor of Michigan, who is Rick Schneider of Flint water fame, he polluted the Flint water. Remember that?
Yep.
He said he would not recognize the marriages. So then we weren't married. And it was weird. And so, okay. And so he got sued. The court
As you
said,
should.
you will recognize those marriages. And so then we were married again. And so what I like to tell people as you hear my story is never take your rights for granted. Just because you have a right doesn't mean you can't lose it. And I
Yep.
would tell my students that just because you have a right doesn't mean you can't lose it. And I think it's important for us to know because we have to stay vigilant. And we
Yep.
need young people like y'all and others to come out and be doing the things that we did in a digital kind of way in 21st century, but also marching and doing those things, being
Mhm.
heard,
Yeah.
because that's what got us to where we are. And, a year later, in 2015, of course, there was legalized marriage. Now, so we've been married, what, 12 years now?
Mhm.
And my accountant was so glad when it became federal because then she didn't have to do separate Michigan states for each of us, or separate, no, federal ones for each of us, and we could do it jointly because of Michigan. And, anyway, she's ended up, that's my accountant is my best friend from high school. She's going to see this too. And she was really, really, one of those really smart people. So we didn't meet in high school because she was in all those AP kind of classes, and I worked. I had other focuses, let's just say.
Yeah.
And remind me to talk to you about my wife and that, okay?
Okay.
So, but anyway, so I thought she would end up being my doctor. She's ended up being my accountant. And so she and Jim, her husband, live in Squim. I not lived in Squim, moved to Squim, and now live in Maggie Valley near Asheville.
Oh,
Ma-
okay.
So great. And we've been close. I mean, she and one other person. I've met every woman I've ever lived with or
Wow.
mostly gone out with for a while. So there's only two people that can say that, and I guess my sister. Now,
That's
my
crazy.
sister and I, like I said, are very different. So here I'm telling you about all these things I've accomplished, right? And I'm looking at this thing, professional service, editorial reviews, awards and honors, professional
Yeah.
memberships. I mean, I'm just looking at this thing,
Yeah,
and
it's
if you want, I
crazy.
can send it to you.
Yes.
Yes. That'd be
Uh,
amazing. Honest.
But I
So you
haven't
could.
updated it recently, so, just
Well,
know,
update that shit.
no, some of it's kind of, like memberships may be a little old or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Although I just renewed my American Counseling Association membership today. Anyway,
Uh,
so my wife, other than Marilyn, is probably the smartest person I've ever met. She's brilliant. And I could not have accomplished these things in the last 36 years without her support, And she worked in the private sector.
Mhm.
When I met her, she was a technical writer
Mhm.
and then went into IT something. And so she was kind of in IT and stuff. She worked for Time Warner CNN. In fact, during the time we were getting married in the courthouse, she contacted her friend who is a lesbian at CNN Digital and
Mhm.
said, "Do you know what's going on down here?" They didn't. And so we were interviewed and we had cameras. So that was pretty cool.
That's
But
fun.
anyway, so that's where she worked. And so somebody had to make money. I'm a counselor and a professor, okay? And so, she had, somebody had to make real money, right? So she worked in the private sector, all right, but she is just fabulous. And she takes such good care of me. In recent years since I've retired,
Mhm.
I worked and worked and worked all my life. I retired and then I got sick
Yeah.
and I ended up with GI issues.
Mhm.
Was in the hospital about 3 times, 4 times. I have a fabulous GI doctor, she's a Democrat. And I looked at her, it was
The best
around
doctors are.
the time of the election, and I said to her, I said, "Look, just keep me alive through the election." And she understood. That's, how badly I was. So, and then, over this last year, apparently, I had breast cancer, and
Mm.
I had a lumpectomy, radiation, targeted radiation, I'm fine now.
Good.
But of all the cancers I was supposed to get, that wasn't it.
Mhm.
Let's
Fair.
just say one. My wife has never inhaled anything. Never. I mean, and when I, the first time we went out, she ordered water and cheese fondue. Back then, I was a bourbon drinking, Marlboro smoking kind of girl. So I like to say I'm the worst thing she's ever done. She needed a bad girl in her life, and apparently that was me.
I love that. I love hearing your story, and I think it's very important for like I mean it's a normal life, but it's also an exceptional life, right? And so like I think it's nice to see somebody who has done things that
And still
like
moved up in the world.
yeah, exactly. Like you can
And
still
I've
do things.
always been, always.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. Like being queer did affect your life, but it didn't hold you back from who you are. And I think that's a very important thing to see right now. And I think
I'm a
especially
virgo.
since yeah, okay, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Let's be honest. But like I think it is very important for especially since we are losing a lot of those rights that you are proving that nobody else can tell you what you can and can't do. Just fucking do it and do what you can, be who you are, and things will work out
Yeah.
somehow.
And I think it's also like it's really important the reminder you said too about like rights. Like I don't know, the acknowledgement that we even though we should be, we're not always promised
Yeah.
the rights that we have.
You
And
aren't.
so I
Look
think
at
it
my
is
life.
yeah. And it's important to like look back and like just see that too, see where rights have went and like grown and been like you
Yeah.
said, like it's happened before with you having to even like go through the marriage thing. Like you're married, you're not married, you're this like
Just because
so
you have a right doesn't mean you can't lose it.
Yeah.
yeah. So
Exactly.
I think that's really
And
important.
that's true, I still worry about that with marriage
Right.
quality,
Right.
Yeah.
whether I'll still be married,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
and a lot of us talk about that kind of thing. And then, how to continue to create a better world for y'all, given what we're facing, because in my
Yeah.
lifetime, we made incremental progress, but it was still
Yeah.
Yeah.
progress. And now I see us moving back. And so y'all got to help manage that.
We're doing our best, I can tell you that.
I was gonna say, if you would be open to it, I would love to have like this be almost like a little two-part series and you
Yeah.
kind of come back and maybe we can get some questions together and just kind of dive in deeper to things because
Yeah.
obviously you have a lot to say and I really appreciate you sharing everything you have today. And I think
Yeah.
as we're getting closer to that hour mark, I would love to just be able to dive in even a little deper if you're open to that. And I think the
Absolutely.
viewers would love that.
And
Yeah.
and I want you people to know about Sinister Wisdom, another women's
Okay. Writing
magazine
it
and
down.
book thing, and they put out a something called Icons. Susan Sherman did it, but it's not me, which is
Mhm.
kind of weird. But it talks about women, leaders and poems and things, but that had come before us. And I just think it's important for people to know that and, to know that we can live like this.
Yeah.
And she talks about the women's music
Love that.
festivals.
I love that. We can live like this. I'll write that down.
We just got back from a cruise, the Olivia women's cruise. Uh, is the second one we took. The first one was to the Caribbean, and this one was to Spain, France, and
Wow.
Italy.
Mhm.
So we just got back a couple weeks ago. And if you lesbians and queer women haven't been on a women's cruise,
Mhm.
want to check it out. Somebody said to me, "What's the best part of being on this cruise?" And I said, "The women." I don't know what Anne would say,
Yeah.
but I said the women.
That's real.
You
And
know,
like being, yeah.
and
Yeah.
Yeah.
so it's
Well,
important.
I love chatting with you, and I know I do want you to give me days in your schedule where you and I can you can just talk at me and I can just get your story and just write it down because I'm serious about that.
So tell me when you're available
Okay.
because, I'm retired.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm the little old lady, as they found out when I went to get my oil changed. I'm the little old lady that drives to the drugstore or the grocery store and back. So I'm around. I've got things I
Yeah.
do, but,
Okay.
we are meeting tomorrow on a Zoom call with people we met on this cruise from
Awesome.
Canada. We've met friends from Ireland,
That's
Belfast,
amazing.
and
Yeah.
201. Nobody will set foot in this country. And I think that's something that we need to be aware of and that
That is
people
true.
need to aware of. And so maybe we can talk a little more about some of that stuff because what you're
100%.
seeing is that I'm really a frustrated history poli-sci professor.
No, I'm excited. We'll definitely get with you and I'll send you
Yeah, send me some times and
schedules
dates and
for sure.
I'll write it in and we'll do it. Well, it
Love
was
that.
nice meeting you. What's your name?
Yes, it was so nice. Co,
Co.
like
Oh,
KO. Yep.
K-O?
Hmm.
Good. And how did you get involved in this?
We live across the street from each other.
Yeah, so we live across the street from each other, and we started this together, actually.
In North
So,
Carolina.
in Smithfield.
Wow.
Yeah, so we met after the recent election, and we got breakfast, and we
Okay.
were like,
How do we make this better?
I don't know, we were like, we want to create something that kind of hones in a little bit more on the joy and like the perseverance of queer people, and we just didn't see that happening in this area per se, you know? Like I feel like I came from Northeast Tennessee, that's where I grew up, and
But sure.
although there were that but like although there were queer people there definitely wasn't as much diversity. And I think when I came to North Carolina, especially just around the central Raleigh area, I was just really shocked with the amount of queer people and like queer culture that has like is here, and it's way more rich than I think people realize. And I think that's why, I don't know, I just felt really, we both felt motivated to kind of showcase that. And then, goal is to make it even bigger and encompass the South, and then who knows where. But
So one of the things we can talk about next time is at ECU, there was nothing when I got here for lesbians. Nothing. There was, it was the Peel Center, which we knew Jesse Peel from he's from Atlanta. But anyway, and that was run, but it's very male oriented.
yeah, that I've seen that a lot in
And
nightlife and stuff.
and
So
so I helped create a women's dinner thing.
that's awesome.
And we still meet. The younger people have taken it over. And now we have a whole women's community that meets, and the younger people do other activities too. And, it's really pretty cool. And we got to know each other that way because we don't have bars and clubs.
Yeah.
No, it's real, especially
we
in more
gotta
rural areas.
Make it happen.
Yeah.
Us,
Exactly.
all
That's
of
true.
us. And I think that's important. All right.
Yes. Well, thank you so much again. And I look forward
Absolutely.
to speaking with you
Yeah.
and getting to know you better.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
All
All
right.
Thank you so
Take care,
much.
you guys.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Have a good weekend.
You too.
And that was Susan Sherman. I just want to say, Susan, thank you so much for being a wonderful, wonderful guest on this podcast. Honestly, we both learned so, so much. And I know we're going to continue to learn so much from you. And I know the audience is also going to as well. Coming out in 1976, she's fought for rights that we use every single day and oftentimes take for granted. And she's never once stopped being exactly who she is. And I think that's so beautiful. And yeah, just like Susan said, I've always been me, always. And I think a lot of queer people, we hit that and we have those moments, but I think sometimes it can even be hard to sit in that. Like sometimes, especially now more than ever, it's easier to hide yourself behind something or behind your passing privileges or behind your white privilege or behind your this privilege or this privilege, when in reality, none of that's going to save us. And at the end of the day, we just need to be as authentic as we can be. It's not always easy, but I think if we want to make our way to change, it's what we have to do. If this episode moved you a little bit or you learned something new, share it, send it to your mom, send it to your family, send it to your friends, and get the vision out there, because you never know what story might change someone's life. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you so much for always being here and being supportive. And we will see y'all in the next one. Buckle up, because it's good. Gorgeous. I don't know what I was even saying. Let's cut that.